Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees, here are today's top stories. The Prime Minister lays out his vision for a high-wage economy. His keynote speech closing the Conservative Party conference mostly focused on his broader philosophy for the nation, including on immigration.
I know that this country is a beacon of light and hope for people around the world, provided they come here legally.
A new survey says school leaders lack confidence in the government's COVID guidance. They report low pupil attendance rates across schools in Britain. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson's special envoy met Taliban leaders in Afghanistan, the first UK official meeting with the Taliban since it seized power. The Prime Minister pledges to move Britain into a high-wage, high-skill economy during his keynote speech in Manchester at the Conservative Party conference. In between characteristic jokes and digs at Labour, he says his plan will lead to lower taxes. There were few policy announcements, but he spoke more broadly about his vision for Britain. NTD's Jane Worrell has the story.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson, upbeat about the future of Britain, closed the Conservative Party conference promising change and setting out his vision for higher wages.
Yes, it will take time, and sometimes it will be difficult, but that was the change that people voted for in 2016, and that was the change that people voted for again powerfully in 2019. And to deliver that change, we will get on with our job of uniting and levelling up across the UK.
In his keynote speech, he spoke broadly, most of it centred around his philosophy. Here he sets out his policies on controlling immigration.
The answer is to control immigration, to allow people of talent to come to this country, but not to use immigration as an excuse for failure to invest in people, in skills, and in the equipment, the facilities, the machinery.
Followed by words on welcoming Hong Kongers and Afghans to the UK.
This is the government that stood up to China and announced that we would provide a haven for British overseas nationals from Hong Kong. 30,000 have already applied. And I'm proud to be part, I'm really proud to be part of a Conservative government that will welcome 20,000 Afghans, people who risk their lives to guide and translate for us. We are doing the right and responsible thing. And speaking as the great-grandson of a Turk who fled in fear of his life, I know that this country is a beacon of light and hope for people around the world, provided they come here legally.
He praised the recent pact between Australia, the UK and the US for defence in the Indo-Pacific.
I know there has been a certain raucous caucus from the anti-AUKUS caucus, but AUKUS is simply a recognition of the reality that the world is tilting on its axis, on its economic axis, and our trade and relations in the Indo-Pacific region are becoming more vital than ever before.
Boris Johnson's speech was about 45 minutes long, which was much shorter than Sir Keir Starmer's last week. In terms of fresh domestic policy, he pledged a £3,000 premium for maths and science teachers to encourage them to go to the areas where they're needed most. He also mentioned Margaret Thatcher by name to defend raising taxes to pay for the NHS and social care. He said that she wouldn't ignore the state of the economy, a reference that was designed to go down well at the Conservative Party conference. Jane Worrell, NTD News.
A new survey says school leaders lack confidence in the government's COVID measures, and nearly half report that pupil attendance this term is lower than expected in a usual year. NTD's Malcolm Hudson has this report.
A recent survey by the National Association of Head Teachers, or NAHT, says almost 80% of school leaders are unconfident or very unconfident with the government's current COVID guidance. They are expressing concerns that current self-isolation guidance is actively contributing to the spread of COVID in schools. We spoke to Director of Policy for the NAHT, James Bowen.
So one of the things we're seeing a lot of at the moment is a child gets COVID, sadly, but then their brother or sister can still carry on coming into school. Now, even if they share a bedroom with them and they're around them all the time, they can carry on coming into school. And what head teachers and school leaders are saying to us is, unsurprisingly, what's happening is those siblings are coming into school and within a few days they're testing positive for COVID, but by that time they've obviously passed it on. So they're seeing that spread quite rapidly through classes. I had one of the school leaders that we work with recently email me, and she had 50% of a class off with COVID because of that scenario.
Children in England currently do not have to isolate if they live in the same household as someone with COVID-19. Instead, they are advised to take a test and only isolate if they test positive.
But we certainly think with siblings, if they were perhaps to have just a few days out, that would probably save a lot of children in the long run from missing school if we can break that sort of chain of transmission.
Pupil attendance has not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels. 2.5% of absences are estimated to be due to COVID-related reasons. The NAHT is gathering for its annual conference this weekend, where new Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi will address school leaders in person for the first time. They have said they are looking forward to working with Zahawi to ensure that school leaders can have confidence in government guidance. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson's special envoy met Taliban leaders for the first time since they seized power in August. But he fell short of officially recognizing the Taliban as Afghanistan's government. NTD's El Rhodes has more on this.
The Prime Minister's High Representative for Afghan Transition, Simon Gass, met Taliban leaders in Kabul on Tuesday. The meeting marked Britain's first diplomatic visit since the Taliban seized power in August. The Taliban hopes the meeting will help refill cash-starved coffers as Afghanistan approaches economic collapse. After the meeting, Longdon tweeted the discussions were serious and substantial, covering topics such as the humanitarian crisis, terrorism, and the importance of safe passage for UK and Afghan nationals. But he fell short of recognising the Taliban government officially, describing the meeting as a test. The Taliban hopes to get their government officially recognised. French President Macron says the forthcoming G20 summit must send a clear message on the conditions for international recognition.
All 20 of us, that is to say the Americans, the Europeans, China, Russia, also the great powers of Asia, the Pacific and Latin America, must absolutely have a very clear message in which we pose our conditions for a recognition of the Taliban.
Macron says the conditions must include equality for women, access for foreign humanitarian operations, and non-cooperation with Islamist terror groups.
We very clearly demand that the regime in Afghanistan be clear about the condemnation and non-cooperation with all Islamist terrorist groups in the region.
Earlier this week, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell says the Taliban government's behaviour up to now is not very encouraging.
Certainly, it is a dilemma, because if you want to contribute to avoid the collapse of the economy in a certain way, you can consider supporting the government. And this is not the case. We don't want to support this government depending on their behaviour.
Borrell says the first planes from the EU with humanitarian aid have landed in Kabul and not met any interference. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
Communications regulator Ofcom has published new guidance for video sharing platforms. They must take measures to protect under 18s from potentially harmful content and all users from videos likely to incite violence or hatred. NTD's Natalia Nutting has the details.
Ofcom has unveiled new guidelines for video sharing platforms, or VSPs, to keep users safe from harmful videos. The guidance says platforms must provide clear rules around uploading content. They must have clear and visible terms and conditions prohibiting content relating to terrorism, child abuse, or racism. The regulator also says VSPs should have easy reporting and complaint processes. Platforms with pornographic material should have age verification measures. Ofcom says VSPs breaching the guidelines will be fined. In serious cases, the services might be suspended or restricted. High-profile platforms such as TikTok, Snapchat, Twitch, OnlyFans and Vimeo are covered by the new regime. YouTube and Facebook are set to fall under Irish jurisdiction. Ofcom says the long-term aim is for VSPs to get ready for the Online Safety Bill. The bill is set to introduce robust regulation across the tech sector. It will require social media firms and internet companies to sign up to a duty of care to protect users. Natalia Nutting, NTD News.
The Welsh Parliament voted on vaccine passports today, and the measure passed by a single vote. But one opposition member missed the vote due to technical difficulties that prevented him from logging onto the video call software Zoom. Vaccine passports will now be mandatory for nightclubs and big sporting events across Wales from Monday. The measures were agreed with 28 Senedd politicians voting for and 27 against. Tory party member of the Senedd, Gareth Davies, who missed out on the vote, would have brought about a tie, meaning the Labour-led government could not bring in the measure. The Senedd's presiding officer, Ellen Jones, said in a statement, for members to vote in the Senedd, they must be present, either in the chamber or on Zoom. And British drug maker AstraZeneca wants US regulators to authorise its new antibody drug, AZD7442, for emergency use. The drug aims to prevent COVID symptoms and could be an alternative to vaccination. The drug is mainly for those with chronic diseases and other conditions that make vaccination less effective. AstraZeneca's study showed a 77% effectiveness in reducing the risk of COVID symptoms in one trial that included over 5,000 participants. It also says the tests suggest the drug could be effective against the Delta variant, though full results have neither been published nor peer-reviewed. The drug was originally developed in the Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. The Vanderbilt team isolated 2 antibodies from a Chinese couple who had COVID-19. The antibodies were then licensed to AstraZeneca, who further optimized them. If the US Food and Drug Administration does authorize the drug, it will be a first-of-its-kind preventative option. Still to come, this year's Nobel Peace Prize winner will be revealed on Friday. Nominations for the prize are locked behind an alarmed door in a vault at Oslo's Nobel Institute. That and more after the break. The European Union's 27 leaders met for a round-table discussion during a summit in Slovenia on Tuesday. They focused on how to establish more autonomy on defence. NTD's Joy Ducat brings us more.
European Union leaders met at Brdo Castle in Slovenia on Wednesday with 6 Balkan countries. The bloc reiterated their pledge to give them membership one day, without providing a concrete date. The day before, EU leaders discussed European defence. French President Macron emphasised the need for the 27-member bloc to continue working with its long-time allies, but at the same time boost what he called European independence and sovereignty.
What does that mean? This means that on the technological and industrial, economic, financial, but also military levels, we must build the terms of a stronger Europe. You know that this is what I deeply believe, a Europe that can take its share of responsibilities for itself and which can choose its partners and work closely with its historical allies.
Leaders argue the messy Western troop withdrawal from Afghanistan has exposed Europe's need for more autonomy on defence. Without American support, European countries wouldn't have been able to guarantee the safe exit of their citizens or even their troops.
After the recent developments in Afghanistan, with China in the Indo-Pacific, it's very clear it's important to develop what I call the collective intelligence of the EU.
The recent AUKUS Indo-Pacific defence deal between the US, Australia and Britain led Australia to cancel a contract for French submarines. France grew frustrated after losing the multi-billion-pound deal. Macron said he's hopeful to re-engage when he meets with US President Joe Biden at the end of October.
It's not an issue about words or perception. It's an issue about facts and what to do together.
The leaders also discussed their relations with China.
Je pense qu'il y a aujourd'hui, je l'ai dit,
It's a situation, I said, in which we are competitors on an economical level, in which we can be partners on climate matters, and in which we clearly have deep disagreements on ethical values. It's in this situation that we must build relations with China.
C'est dans cette grammaire que nous devons bâtir avec la Chine.
The talks were intended to prepare the ground for an EU summit later this month in Brussels and a March meeting focusing on European defence. Joy Dugid, NTD News.
A town in Bavaria is offering COVID-19 antibody tests to everyone suspected of receiving fake shots. This comes as a local GP is investigated for allegedly faking hundreds of vaccinations. NTD's Eddie Aiken brings us this report.
A general practitioner in Bavaria is suspected of falsifying COVID-19 vaccination certificates and conducting fake vaccinations. According to German media reports, the doctor in the town of Vamding is alleged to have only pretended to administer a vaccine, but possibly injected a saline solution instead.
Logically, if it's the case that vaccination certificates have been issued incorrectly, the criminal code regarding documentary offences is of course a good approach to examine here. And should there have been cases in which people who wanted to be vaccinated actually did not receive a vaccination, it will have to be examined to see whether there may also be offences of bodily harm.
The prosecutor's office estimates several hundred patients are affected. Authorities say there may be two groups. Some patients were duped and others went to the doctor to obtain a false certificate. Police conducted a search of the doctor's practice last week. Patients are now being offered antibody tests and fresh vaccinations if necessary. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
The winner of this year's the Nobel Peace Prize will be revealed Friday morning. Making the final choice is a secretive process, with deliberations not being revealed until 50 years later. NTD's Joy Dugid has the story.
The Nobel Peace Prize will be awarded on Friday. Some 329 individuals and organisations make up this year's nominees. Director of Peace Research Institute, Oslo Hendrik Ørdal, says Reporters Without Borders is one of the front-runners.
I think a journalist prize this year would be very important and speak both to the fight against fake news and the important work that journalists are doing in armed conflict areas all over the world.
Ørdal says the committee may want to address the big issues of democracy and free speech, so a prominent political dissident is also an option.
The second candidate that I think is a frontrunner this year is Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, the Belarus opposition leader. She's been leading a largely non-violent fight against the dictator of Belarus.
The Nobel Peace Prize is one of the world's most prestigious awards. A 5-person committee appointed by the Norwegian Parliament decides who wins. Deliberations remain forever secret, with no minutes taken of discussions. The nominations for the prize are locked behind an alarmed door in a vault at Oslo's Nobel Institute.
The green boxes are the nominations themselves. The blue boxes are the letters to and from the Norwegian Nobel Institute or the Nobel Committee.
The public won't have access to the documents until 50 years later. The newest documents made public are about the 1971 laureate, Willy Brandt, the then Chancellor of West Germany.
I think the legacy is the Europe is here today, basically. It was the beginning of the Détente in Europe, and it was fulfilled when the Iron Curtain fell in 1889-90.
Thousands of people, from members of parliaments worldwide to former winners, can propose candidates. The prize rewards something achieved or can encourage ongoing processes.
But on a general basis, you can see that the Peace Prize is given out not for people being angel saints, but for people making enough effort to make a better world, a better organized world, and a world with less war and more peaceful coexistence between the peoples.
Nominations already revealed this year include Russian activist Alexei Navalny and the World Health Organization. Joy Dugid, NTD News.
And one contender for the Nobel Peace Prize, Reporters Without Borders, warns the threats journalists are facing have diversified. More than 300 journalists are still jailed around the world. NTD's Eddie Aiken has this report.
Press freedom group Reporters Without Borders warns threats against journalists around the world have diversified in recent years. It's not only despotic regimes. Today, mafias, extremist groups and some movements are also posing threats against journalists.
There is a multiplication, one could say a diversification of the entities or individuals which are against journalism and wants to weaken it or even kill it.
Reporters Without Borders, commonly known by its French abbreviation RSF, is the largest NGO specializing in the defense of media freedom. It's been vocal in calling for press freedom in countries including Belarus, Burma, also known as Myanmar, and Turkey.
The pressure of media coverage is not enough. So we entered into a new strategy of direct engagement. We do have talks, contacts, even with bad guys.
Deloire says more than 300 journalists remain jailed across the world. In many countries, journalists are targeted, threatened and killed.
There is one reason, is that now it's easier for anybody, a despotic regime, a religious group, any type of group of people, to send direct propaganda to its audience.
RSF is a contender for this year's Nobel Peace Prize. Belarusian opposition leaders Maria Kolesnikova and Veronika Tsepkala, an imprisoned Kremlin critic, Alexei Navalny, are also among the nominees for the prize. The winner, announced on the 8th of October, will be awarded about £840,000. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
In a rundown old factory in Belgium, a Holocaust survivor celebrated his upcoming 90th birthday by starring in an opera inspired by his life. A history of love, faith and forgiveness overcoming the darkest tragedy. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us the story.
Simon Gronowski, at almost 90 years old, performs in an opera based on his life. In 1943, aged 11 and living in Brussels, Nazis put him, his mother and sister on a train bound for Auschwitz, the infamous death camp in Nazi-occupied Poland.
My message is not a message of sadness, but of hope and happiness.
The train was briefly stopped by 3 Belgian resistance fighters in Boortmeerbeek, 19 miles northeast of Brussels. In the ensuing chaos, Gronowski jumped off. He went on to survive World War II in hiding. His family perished at Auschwitz, where more than 1 million people, mostly Jews, were killed.
During 60 years, I didn't speak about all this tragedy.
British composer Howard Moody was inspired by Gronowski's story, who had told him that his life is but a miracle, and wrote an opera to tell his tale.
He said, "Ma vie n'est qu'un miracle." And having heard the pain of his story, for him to say that seemed a really beautiful thing to say. So I said, "This is an incredible thing to say," and I shook his hand and I said, "I promise to write my next opera on your story." And that's how Push came about.
But there's more to it. Gronowski developed an extraordinary friendship with Konrad Tunnel, the son of Flemish Nazis whose brother had served as the prison guard of Gronowski's family at Auschwitz. This too is covered in the opera.
I am the child of a family of Nazis. I saw all of that. And then I was lucky enough to meet this Jewish boy who escaped that cruelty, and to be able to say to him, "I am pained. You are my brother."
Monsieur, j'ai de la peine. Je vous aime. Vous êtes mon frère.
The opera named Push has been performed several times in Belgium and in the UK. To mark Gronowski's 90th birthday next week, Moody put on a special performance last Sunday in Remenon, a village in Antwerp, Belgium, in which both Gronowski and Adele appeared, playing themselves.
It is a message of hope and happiness, and that the life is beautiful.
The performance was staged in an old furniture factory near Boortmeerbeek, where Gronowski jumped off the train nearly 80 years ago. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
And the latest James Bond film, No Time to Die, took a mighty £88 million at the international box office over its opening weekend. Universal Pictures said the British and Irish box office led the way with a total of £26 million. It's made No Time to Die the biggest film release here during the pandemic. It's also the highest opening three-day weekend ever in the UK and Ireland for a Bond movie. The film was delayed 3 times from its planned April 2020 release date because of the pandemic. No Time to Die has yet to arrive in North America, arriving in movie theaters in the US and Canada on Friday. Universal and Studio MGM decided to release the film exclusively in theaters rather than on their streaming platforms at the same time. And finally, British singer Adele has teased her first new songs since her 2015 Grammy Award-winning album 25, with a video clip on her social media accounts. Here's NTD's Joy Duguid with more.
Known for chart-topping ballads such as Hello and Someone Like You, Adele posted the black and white video on her Twitter and Instagram pages on Tuesday, with the caption, "Easy on Me, October 15. Within 2 hours of sharing the teaser, the video had almost 5 million views and had sent the internet into a frenzy. Adele released 25 in November 2015. It topped charts around the world and scooped the coveted Album of the Year prize at the Grammy Awards. Over the last few days, her fans have speculated online that the 33-year-old was set to release new music as the number 30 was mysteriously beamed onto buildings around the world. Adele has referenced her age when naming her past 3 albums, 19, 21 and 25. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.